today I'm going to be speaking with Annie Chow. Now, Annie Chow is a woman that doesn't know her own power, I guess, to some extent. She embraces all backgrounds, all cultures, all room for everybody to have beliefs of their own, whilst also supporting and encouraging and nurturing new and younger skill sets and returner skill sets to do well in the technology industry. We're going to spend some time talking about how that has come about for Annie and what she's found successful, and hopefully you'll get something useful out of it. Let's go back with you to the beginnings as such. I mean, I actually met you through many a different place. Like, we've turned up at so many. I can't remember where the very original one was, but we ended up at all the same events.
Credit Alan for our original introduction.
Yes,
he
that's
likes
right.
to remind me. So I think it was at the Cybersecurity Summit, I would say 2022. That was the first year
For COVID, yeah.
And I remember, seeing you on stage and how dynamic you were, and what a breath of fresh air you were to a lot of the atypical types of speakers we would have normally on panels, and just immediately felt the vibe. And it was Alan who actually approached you first. And I don't know how that happened, but I remember him doing the introduction and we clicked like that.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of our wonderful friendship. So
we've been all the same. I keep crossing paths all the time ever since, and involved in so many different things. Like, it's been a journey, that's for sure. 2022, eh? But,
yeah.
And I have never, until we came to doing this podcast, it has never occurred to me to ask about your priors. That makes it sound like you've had a criminal record, but you know what I mean? Any of your life prior to the, being in tech and all of your experiences now. So today is the day. So you did tell me that you come from Hong Kong and moved to the US, and that's really about as much as I had. So I'm curious to find out what that story is, and what kind of pivotal experiences that you had that shaped that real drive for success that you have now. That's completely undeniable that you have now, and how you might mentor anyone else that's facing similar challenges. There's a lot of questions there in the one, but
I'll just go first, just to open it up, right? Because typically the elephant in every new room I walk into is like, where are you from? And so I'm originally from Hong Kong, and I moved to San Diego, California when I was 10 years old. And that's where I learned English and, through a lot of music. So I'm a very musical person as a result of that. And I got my bachelor degree in 3 years with a double major in political science and communications from UC Berkeley. I managed campaign financing before moving to London after my candidate lost the presidential election. So I did marketing for fashion industry before eventually coming over to Ireland. And I had a 3-month work visa and landed in Dell doing marketing, and had been with them for 18 years after that, just unexpectedly. So, Dell had been kind of where I did a lot of growing up. I didn't expect to have a career in tech, as you can hear my background is not technical, but it's given me that opportunity to evolve as the company also evolved. And so I've really grown with that. And the more I matured in the company and in myself as, a woman, as a mother, as a wife, and all of that, I really honed in on how do I support more women in this space. I didn't come from necessarily an advantaged background, but I didn't come from the drastically disadvantaged background either. So how can I bridge that gap for those people who didn't have the same type of advantages, even though they were, carved through hard work? But sometimes it just takes that like one person to help make a difference. And I just wanted to be part of somebody's lives where I could be, in any small way, a one person to help them flip that switch or give them that encouragement, give them that boost or open that door or maybe just a window, all of that. So that's kind of my journey to date.
So when you came, did you come to work for Dell or did you come, did an Irishman bring you here?
Yeah, no. But an Irishman kept me here.
Yeah.
I came with just a 3-month work visa, and I honestly thought maybe I just hadn't had a chance to travel Europe.
Yeah.
Obviously, like Asiatic continents, and then the Americas had that opportunity. Just nothing in Middle Earth, so to speak. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time here, but oddly enough, was deemed overqualified to be a barmaid, in Ireland. And that was kind of the resounding feedback I kept getting for every time, I walked in. And so I just, went looking for, there was a job opening for marketing assistant in Dell and went for it. I remember it was July 7th that I walked in for the interview because that was the same day as the London bombings.
Yeah.
And I
7/11, wasn't it?
remember that was, really, one of the buses that blew up was one that I would have taken to work.
Yeah.
And so that was very bit of a shock,
Of course,
as you
yeah.
can imagine. And I don't know, I can't remember the interview because of it. All of my friends were still in London. But luckily, ended up with the position. And again, thought I'd only be here for 3 more months. So never imagined that I got, the sponsorship extended my visa. And then I got my, Dell then sponsored my business degree as well. And, they're on. And it just kind of snowballed.
And 18 years later, it's amazing how it can like just progress so quickly, as did you. And then, so, I mean, I obviously know you as one of the best supporters of women in every which way. It's not even specific to tech. You're what we call a connector. I think in sales terms, they call them connectors as well, but just in life terms, that just connects people all over. So a super valuable role to have.
I think coming in, when you talked about, you mentioned my skin walking in, right? And what it's like to walk through life and, classrooms, meeting rooms, and boardrooms with my skin. And I think one of the things that I always mentor or, the advice I give to my mentees and just people around me and my kids, it's that I decide how I get to show up.
Yeah.
And I choose what to be in the room in that particular day and moment. And whether I am Chinese, whether I'm American, whether I'm a woman or a leader or a team member or a speaker or the sitting in the audience or a mom or being that professional, I get to choose how I want to show up. And that's something that I really like to, reinforce every time, because you can get a lot of noise and you get to pick and choose your identity because it's our own. That is something that, you have control over. We are all made up of so many different things. So that's what I advise. And that's what I've always been kind of helped me steer myself in that sense, because I could lean into the politics if I wanted to, or I can lean into the commercial business management if I wanted to. And it just depends how I feel and what I feel is critical and crucial for the room that I'm in and what serves me best at the time as well.
Absolutely.
So,
I like that because, like you say, you're taking that power and that ownership back rather than being a brand of someone else's making. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of doing that unintentionally because of how you look or your background or different species. Some people will make assumptions, but I like that leaning into that. And I think it's applicable to anybody with that mindset to do that. I'm definitely stealing that one. For sure. I hadn't thought about it that way. And it does, it's so, it makes sense. Yeah. Because you can apply it and then it's yours. Like, so you can choose how you represent yourself in that moment. I like that. And then, so how has your journey then informed how you support or develop those initiatives for, say, disadvantaged groups, especially when it comes to like tech or the professional communities? Because you've obviously done a lot of work around that as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of it is staying agile and listening. Those are the two things that for me is the core of the first step of problem solving anything.
Yeah.
And when you're a fish out of water, you learn to find ways to breathe and you learn fast. So that's kind of what, being in a disadvantaged group, you would have that agility built in, and that's part of your nature to be not like agile and super adaptive because you have to be. But first, before I develop anything, it's really understanding the surroundings, who's in the room, who are my allies, and what problem am I looking to solve? Setting that foundation first. So just because I see that problem or there's a gap doesn't mean that there's one solution or one core issue that drives that.
Yeah.
And so it's really taking that step and really understanding, what the environment is, and then equally looking at what's my desired outcome? Like, why am I doing this? What am I looking to achieve? And how do I measure success in what I'm trying to develop? And then looking at, what's the cost of not taking any action here? If I do nothing, what happens? And, if I just let it go, what's it going to look like 12, 24, 36 months from now?
Yeah.
And then, looking at what are my barriers to what it is that I want to accomplish, and then reviewing my options. And those are typically ways that help me to navigate any project, whether, from a work perspective, professionally, or in an organization, to developing initiatives for disadvantaged groups, because there's very similar methodologies of thought that you have to really put together and look at how do we drive it. And then, and for me, like, it's like holidays. I plan like 80%, and then 20% I leave it like flexible for fun. And that's where a lot of times I find that 20% is what drives the success, because that flexibility in the 20% is where creativity, innovation, all of those things goes into that bucket. And more importantly, like the fun as well. So those are things that I've used and tool sets that that I've learned from my own experience and what works for me and what works for the problems I'm working to solve and the people that I'm looking to serve and support as well.
I like that. It's very strategic, and you can set goals and you can measure it then in that sense. But I think it can happen too easily that we'll fall into the trap, especially with my minority communities, of like, I don't know if sympathetic is the way to do it, but spending too much time in the victim side of it as opposed to in the actual making changes or structuring, projects and policies. And I think it happens too often. There's not that there shouldn't be sympathy, don't get me wrong, or empathy or whatever is needed for those particular groups, but the action needs to happen as well. And sometimes you've got to push through that discomfort to create the actions. I think if you're approaching with a strategic approach like that, it feels really doable.
Yeah, it's doable. And it also highlights what the problem is, because you want to change it from anecdotal to data. And the data is there. We just have to find it and then, carve that out. This is where it's coming from. I'm not saying gender balance is not an issue because I'm a woman and I thought of it. Here are all of the data on the back end that supports it. And equally, when you look at diversity, whether that is neurodiversity or racial diversity, gender diversity, we're not saying it because we fall into the minority and we want to, carve out something. It's not a sympathetic story, sensationalistic claim. These are factual data that influences outcomes in, all facets, and whether it's commercial or, just socially and in communities. So for me, that those are really, when we look to create and solve problem in that light, I think it's more tangible, and then people get to be more mobilized in it, because it's less, well, how does that impact me? And then you go, here's the data.
Yeah, it's more purposeful. And which leads me, like you mentioned some of the other groups there, like neurodiverse and the underrepresented as well. So you obviously will have seen in your time working in the industry, will have seen some challenges, I guess, when it comes to building and nurturing talent in big tech organizations that are within those kind of small groups. So what have you seen that are the biggest challenges so far, or even still big challenges in that case?
Yeah, I think there's two core challenges that I've noticed in the recent years, and even months. The first one being return to site, and the second being the high investment in technology, but low investment in people.
Yes.
So with the return to site, I find, team members that I work with who may be neurodivergent, and noise and light sensitivity comes into play. We've had that time where, some folks may not have only been working from home because of COVID. They might have always been working from home, but now having to justify their remote work and feeling that discomfort in sharing why they had to be in remote work in the first place, because there's also organizational changes, and the leader you worked with before isn't the leader you work with today. So how do you navigate your career while balancing your own mental health and, the conditions that you need in order to thrive? I've seen, also even in offices, meeting rooms are glass boxes. And while transparency is lovely and, speaks for other things, and it's great to have as well. And it's also just like spatially, I guess, like, the zen of it is also really nice. But then you also remove the element of privacy. And some people are uncomfortable. And imagine having a, performance review, and and people are just walking by, and you can't react because you're in a glass box of like literal emotions. I think of that like Anchorman, in that, and it's like it's on display for the rest of the population in the building. So I feel like those are some of the things that, while the intent may be good, not having the option to be flexible to people's needs and also the needs of the circumstances as well. Those are things that will be very limiting and are very challenging for some, especially if, we're now all in this like open plan floor, and just you have no control over the noise level because everyone's on calls, and you can't hear your own thoughts sometimes, or you're hearing too many other people's thoughts. And, those are things that I feel will hinges on performance, and sorry, not hinge, but will dampen, actually deter. And so that's one element. The other piece is, the high investment in technology, but low investment on people. In that, I know like technology's, fast paced, and we want to continue to advance technologically and be more innovative. And we want to work, to streamline operations and also simplify the way we work. But sometimes when we streamline and we simplify to like one mode of transport, it doesn't mean that it helps everyone reach their destination, because we're all responsible for different things. So, having only one way of doing things, you're eliminating people's pathways. And they're prohibiting them to reach the places that they're actually hired to get you to. So, those are things that I feel like we need to help support our talent, not, just even not for progression, but just to be able to do their day job,
Yeah.
what they're supposed to be intending to do. You're asking people who are going from walking to driving. And yes, a car's going to get you there faster, but with cars, if you look at Dublin city center, there are roadblocks, there are one-way streets, there's constructions, there's detours, and we have to be able to help retrain our team members, and so that they're not stranded on a vehicle and not really know how to get them there because, they're stuck in the car.
Yeah.
It's a lovely car. It's a beautiful car. Means nothing if I can't get across the river,
Yeah. Can't
So
get the
where
work
am I
done,
supposed
and
to be?
it's counterproductive in every way. Like, and it's funny you were
Yeah,
talking about the office and the noise and stuff there. Did you notice? I know I noticed this, certainly with me, so definitely happened with other people, that being at home during COVID and working from home, like I didn't use a headset and a microphone. So by the time it came to going back into the office and going on a headset and a microphone, I realized how much louder I am in a communal office than I was before. You kind of lose the context when you're at home all the time like that. And it's, there's plenty of people found themselves kind of retraining, I guess, back into being able to have the conversations at a level that was acceptable for the office, but at home they'd have them differently. And it wasn't something I had anticipated many things at working from home, but that was one of them. And everybody doing that then makes it even louder again in an
it
environment
is
like
that.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you're like on the sales floor,
Oh my gosh,
and
yeah.
everybody's talking to their customers. That was
Yeah.
I remember one of my colleagues said that I never needed to use the phone to call San Diego because my voice is so loud. And I'm like, I
Lovely.
can't help. This is like, I try to adjust my settings, but like it's really hard, especially when you do have the headset.
Yeah.
You are in a zone and it's really hard to, I'm not listening to you, but like I am so sorry you had to listen to me. So,
Yeah.
so those are things I feel like being at home. I had my headset mainly to separate my work from my home in that sense. That
Yeah.
was my barrier. When I put my headset down,
You
I
were
was
done.
free. Like, I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do in front of the desktop.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you had your headphone ears, like, it's just guard like hours and hours with the headphones on. But, that was, so we maybe have done it differently, but coming in from a sales environment, you're just on this really
Yeah.
booming floor. Like you think about like the trading floors, in Wall Street, that's
That's
kind
what
of,
it feels like. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
I
And
have
you're
one of
kind of,
the advantages with my neurodiversity is that I can zone out of it completely. But the problem is then if somebody actually speaks to me, I won't hear them at all. Like I'll be completely zoned out. It's like we used to make fun of my dad when I was younger because he'd watch soccer on the TV, and we would all, as teenagers, be rambling around. You could be getting changed, dressed up to go out for the evening, or you could be fighting with each other, anything. All the chaos would be happening around him, and he would be locked in on what he'd watch on TV with completely no idea of what was happening around him. And I realized that, well, guess where I got my neurodivergency from? But I can do the same thing too. So in the office, it was never as bad. And then in our office, we had lots of different people with lots of different languages. So there was actually, I think I was one of the few in that particular area that spoke English. It's a lot easier to tune out when you can't understand what people are saying. But it still
yeah.
is. But noise wise, yeah, it was a big adjustment after being at home all the time.
Mm,
Like even with a family at home who are not quiet, it's still a big adjustment. And not a big thing to fix. Whether
yeah.
it's that you give people noise cancelling earphones or you just change the seating or something, it doesn't cost millions to fix something like that. Just a little
Mm,
bit of thought in the approach.
yeah.
And when it comes to leadership, then how do you approach the inclusive leadership side of things, especially like you'd have worked with global teams just to make sure that all of those diverse voices as such are being heard and feeling valued?
Yeah. Well, I suppose as a connector, as you call me, I invest my time in knowing people and getting to know people. So it's really important for me to understand how they prefer to operate, because as much as we say, oh, you have to speak up, people aren't always comfortable speaking up for multitudes of reasons. So
Absolutely.
I learned to understand them first and, look at what are your preferred methodologies of communication? Do you want me to send you in an email? Do we want to talk it out? And, some people want very specific instructions and some people just want to know what they can't do. Like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
And so having that understanding and, and in doing that, like in order to have the understanding, you foster that psychological safety first. And
Yeah.
that's part of, that relationship building, which for me is so important in, in any setting, particularly in team, but anytime you're dealing with people, relationship comes first. And, I ask a lot of questions and I look at a person from more than what they were hired to do or what we needed them to produce and, what number they need to hit and whatnot. I'd like to know, how many siblings do you have? And, where do you sit in that? Oh, like, that helps me to learn how they work in a team from the get-go,
Yeah.
and if you've always, if you're an only child, it changes the way that you work and what you're used to and all of that. So, building that trust and making sure that my team members, whoever I work with, know that I am a trusted person for them, that everything they talk to me about is confidential and that I value integrity above all else. And I just want you along with me on this journey. We're looking to solve a problem together. Let's figure out how we do that best. And then being, agile to the different people. I don't have one way to do things because I don't work with the same people. And even if I do, they're not the same person that I would have worked with 5 years before. So those are, staying agile and learning about people's journeys and just, working with people and fostering that is the most important piece for me to encourage that diversity and, the comfortability and the ease of being able to be vocal, whether it's written or, spoken. And those are things that help me to build stronger teams and making sure that are we all aligned? Because I can tell you one thing, but you could take something completely different from what I say. And that in a cultural, when you throw in 36 countries,
Yeah.
that can be a really big mix. And I have to be mindful of what countries I am operating in as well, because my American self is all well and good, in certain settings, but I have to dial that down, my directness, my volume,
Yeah.
and
I
all
don't
of
know what
that.
you mean.
Yeah, yeah, in certain territories, I
Yeah.
have to be really mindful of that. That's, and accepting that it's not going against my nature, but it's just being, adaptive to my surroundings. This is part of where I am at, not necessarily I have to change who I am. It's just adapting. I
Yeah.
breathe different underwater than I do,
Of course.
on land. So it doesn't change my biology. So that's how I approach, inclusive leadership as well, is understanding that landscape, building those, relationships with people as individuals and as people, and then fostering that psychological safety for everyone to feel comfortable to voice themselves and know that they will be heard.
Absolutely. Psychological safety is like one of my favorite terms. I have a statement that I'm going to make in response to that I have heard. Now, everything that you're saying, I would align to that 100% when it comes to how I would like to lead as well. But I have heard this statement from people, not necessarily that I work with sometimes, but different people around go, well, Annie, that takes so much effort.
Mm.
I've heard that. Would you agree? I know how I feel on it and I know how I would answer it, but I'm curious to hear, like, when somebody says something like that to you, like, would you agree that it takes so much effort?
I would say that I get so much value out of it.
I don't tish. Yes. Yes.
I don't, sometimes, waking up in 6 a.m. to go for a run also takes effort. But I get so much value out of it. And we, we might not all be social and we all may have different ways of managing, but I look at, the long run, what does it bring me? And is it worth investing? What else? Is it worth, like I tell my kids sometimes, you could have done 15 minutes of studying so that you can get an hour of gaming, but because you didn't do the 15 minutes, you don't get to game today. So
Yeah.
was it worth not investing 15 minutes to yield that gain? And that's how, my approach is for everything. Yes, it's time. Everything is time consuming, but I want to make sure that the time that I invest is going to yield a greater gain in the long run. And so that's, communicating, building relationships. Those are things that makes our lives easier. It never makes it harder. Uh, yeah, I've never felt like, while I over invested my time in knowing this, and gosh, what a waste. I've never, ever once felt that.
No, same here. Like, and I was curious because, like I say, that's very much how I would feel about it as well. And I think the rewards are unreal, and the rewards are not necessarily like things that I personally benefit from, but it's like parenting when your kids win a match or they're on a stage, or even when they've gotten a result for something that is important to them that they're happy with. And you get that sense of pride because you've somehow been involved in that action, whether it just means that you fed them every day. That's your involvement as a parent. But when it comes to your team, I think that's the differentiator between leadership and management. Because leaders want to see how they can get the best out of everybody that's in their team and have those people grow and feel the best within themselves. Whereas managers want to get the most work or the most results maybe out of the team. And the irony is, I always find, is that putting that investment, like you say, the 15 minutes, but putting that investment in, like, what the yield from that has always blown my mind, even though that was never my intention. My intention was always to learn more and do well and help them grow. But it's all the yield for both the individual and for me as a person influencing their career or their roles. The yield and the value and the joy that I get out of it always exceeds what I could have imagined. So when people ask me, like, oh, or they go, like, it takes so much effort. Like, no, by the time in the beginning, if you've suddenly got a brand new team and you've got 10 people, yes, it's going to take a lot of effort to get to know them. Once you settle into it, it's actually a whole lot less effort maintaining that relationship and keeping the productivity of the team going, because you all know each other well enough that you're just tuned in and you do that. You don't need to be giving them instruction and checking that they've done their work and all of this kind of stuff. Like, it feels like a no-brainer to me, but I itched to make the statement while you were saying that, because I surprisingly come across it way too often.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm one of those that I build a playbook with the players that I have,
Yes.
not for the game. Like, I don't force people to do things the way that it's always been done, because it's so important to know where people's strengths are and capitalize on that. And you won't ever learn that if you don't get to know people and what drives them as well. How do you motivate a team if you don't know what drives the individuals that make up the team?
Yes.
And we all have different motivations. And so how we define success isn't just reaching, the deliverables that you have assigned, but, it's in the gray areas that we don't necessarily talk about because, it's not part of your strategic priorities, but it's in the details. And knowing your team is crucial to knowing how to best build and strengthen the team to get to what you want to do. So it's never time wasted to build those relationships and to learn and check in, because you may tell me one thing, Jenny, as well, and then circumstances change and we might have other things that come up. And it's so important to know and to recognize, hey, somebody's off their game a little bit, and what's going on here?
Yeah.
Is it something that's cause for concern? And is it something that I can do to help? or is it something I need to be mindful of and adjust accordingly? Because we are, looking to move forward together.
Yes.
And I hate to have anyone left behind because I just didn't see it, or I saw it and didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when it comes then to like, what strategies do you use when it comes to identifying, say, high potential talent, especially if that talent doesn't follow a traditional career path?
Yeah. So I think for me, the most important is looking for attitude, and rather than skills. Skills can be learned. Like some of
Yes.
those attributes, like tactical skills, I think some is transferable, others are, you can learn that. But like, I can't teach somebody who doesn't want to learn. So
Yeah.
attitude for me is everything. And if you're open, if you're thirsty to absorb new information and look at different approaches and look at different ways of working, that adaptability and agility and the curiosity, those are the three elements that I think will help for any talent that you'd want on your team, because nothing we do is ever the same. And so why would you want the people to have only the same skill sets?
Mhm.
And we need people who are able to be really agile and adaptive. And also we need people who seek trends. And we also need people who are, are the rock stars that are always there kind of to do the work. And then you have, different people. So it's really important to have that dynamic team, and, knowing your gaps as well is important. It's not just about what I'm seeking in others, but it's also understanding what I need, where my growth areas are. And is it easier to hire somebody who can fill in that gap, or is it easier for me to learn it? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's understanding the whole and not just a particular role and what is expected to do, but, look at how that person will fit in as a whole. Those are all considerations that I feel are crucial in talent seeking.
And you know a lot of people obviously across a lot of different companies and a lot of different backgrounds. Do you find that there is an appetite for that kind of approach? Because if you're looking at job postings anywhere, say on the
Sure.
internet, there's tends to be a traditional like must have a degree or a master's in XYZ, must have X amount of years of experience for this entry level job often. But lots of these things where there's like a box ticking exercise. And don't get me wrong, my kids, I want them in college, I want them getting degrees as well. They
Yeah.
are good to have. But when you've got that opportunity for talent that doesn't have that traditional route, across the kind of people that you're spending your days talking to in and out, do you see that movement towards not even exclusively that kind of mindset, but
Mm.
embracing it at all?
I don't know about the embrace, but I certainly see the awareness that's coming up because we're talking about it more. And
Yeah,
that's usually the first step. Um, it's not something that I think all leaders are adaptive to either. And so it's not just the talent seeking, the candidates that need to be adaptive. It's the
yeah,
leaders making and the decision makers that equally need to be adaptive and agile and be more, thought leading in that sense rather than tactical management, or, in that sense. So I think more education needs to be provided, offered, and normalized even around some of these conversations about hiring. And right now, I think where we're at, like there's certainly different stress tests of, are companies prioritizing that, or are they prioritizing tick the box?
yeah,
And I can't do a broad brush on it. It really is depending on the leader. It's not even
yes,
company or industry. It's very much down to the individual leaders. And so, um, that answer is very fluid, and I hope will continue to evolve. But I think by having podcasts like these and having more people like you, Jenny, on stage that are, not typical to, the standard copy and paste, type of speakers we may have, I'll, I think that's, progress will be slow, but, we think about Atomic Habits with James Clear,
Yeah,
like at least we're going in the right direction. And eventually we'll see that come into fruition. But I think I don't want to set the expectation that it's going to change and shift overnight either, because
yeah,
there's a lot of people and a lot of leaders that will take a lot of convincing to, open their mind, because it's not even convinced. They can't convince somebody who doesn't acknowledge that there's a problem to begin with.
true. And I think storytelling is huge in that. I mean, I'm going to, because I don't think I've told it yet on the podcast, tell the story. My experience story with it is, as a hiring manager in Tenable, we were bringing in security engineers. So the expectation is that they'll have a certain criteria, but we're allowed the freedom as an individual hiring manager to look outside of that.
Mm.
And I was bringing in a security engineer, and there was our recruiter had said, "Hey Jen, knowing you, do you want to have a look at an outlier?" When I had pretty much made a decision, but we hadn't made an offer to a person. And I was like, "Okay, give us a look. Let us see." And I brought a woman to the table who hadn't got a background in cybersecurity at all, but had a
Mm.
background in publishing, but had all of the other things that we needed. So sales engineering, had been a sales engineering manager, had done it for years, was really, really good at it, and a great track record. And you talked about the thirst, I talked about the hunger, same thing. But within the first couple of minutes in the interview, it became really, really clear that that person was absolutely determined to get this role and do whatever needed to be done in order to excel in that role. Was well aware that they didn't have the cybersecurity background, actually raised it before even I got to raise it. And
Mm.
it was that hunger for me, probably because my background is different as well. I'm not going to deny any bias in that case, but that made me change my mind and make the decision to go with that individual. And, I was met with some reservation by some people who would think differently than I do, which is fine, because people have to challenge you for you to be, in order to qualify your own leadership processes and thoughts. But that individual ended up being in one of the top 10 global SEs in the company within the next year, and then got promoted in a skip promotion, actually promoted 2 tiers up instead of 1 tier up. So there's times it's not going to work. But
Yeah.
that for me was always the best example of it working. And I call her out all the time on LinkedIn. I won't call her by name on this because she tells me, "Would you shut up, Jenny, and stop doing it? I'm embarrassed." But but I always talk about it as an example of it can work if you're willing to take the chance. And if you bring somebody into your team, you tend to know within that. That's why probation exists. You tend to know within the
Yeah.
probation if it's going to work or not. But this lady brings an entirely different flavor to the rest of the team, which brings more depth to what they do, more, different thought processes and approaches to what they do into. So the whole thing works better from there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say have a team
Absolutely.
of all of them. You need to mix it.
Mm.
You need all of these different people to make it up. But there's definitely opportunity to think that way. I was lucky. My recruiter understood me, understood what I wanted, and knew that he could put that person in front of me and it would be taken seriously. That won't always be the case. But I'm one of those people. I was like her. I definitely, there was a chance taken on me, and I made it my business to show them that they made the right decision. And
Yeah.
it worked. So yeah, I'd be a big advocate for that, but you need the combo of both.
Yeah. And I find, as you're saying that, um, I'm looking at leadership, and I think about the movie Apollo 13. Do you remember
Yeah,
seeing that? Tom
yeah,
Hanks.
fabulous.
Uh, there's a scene in the movie where obviously they, need to get the astronauts back home.
Yeah,
And they're, a wreck in the ship itself. And they're looking at how do we use what we have?
yeah,
And one of the engineers said, well, this part was designed to do ABC. And the flight director says, I don't care about what things are designed to do. I care about what they can do.
and do. Yes,
And that was kind of, for me, was like, wow, I'm so glad to hear that, because that's what you want. You don't want things to just fit in the way that you needed to at the time. You want things to be able to do more than what you need them to do. So
yeah,
that always stuck with me as well, when I'm making decisions around who do I want on my team is, what's their design versus what's their capabilities.
Yes, I love that. That's a really, really great example. Like, and even while you're thinking about it, I laugh at the, like, that's where the innovation and the growth is really at. Like, and I jest sometimes about how it can be in silly places. Like, we talk about the women's toolkit. It's a high heel shoe and a knife. That's our screwdriver and that's our hammer. But it's actually being creative with the things that you have around you, because we weren't allowed to use those things. We didn't have access to them way back when. So we used what we did. Like in my office, and I would turn the camera around to show, except my room is an absolute state. But I currently have a door handle that's made from a spoon, because in a moment when the door closed and the handle fell off it, I pushed a spoon through the hole and pulled it together. But it's a tiny daft thing. It's about thinking about things differently. And I actually keep it there on purpose to remind me that I'm capable of thinking differently to other people, and that's a good thing. So every time I open my door with my spoon handle and I leave that room, I'm reminded that I am capable of thinking differently to other people, and that is a good thing. It's like a mantra every day. But that, in the same way as like your quote, it's about understanding that there is such a massive amount of capability and innovation and growth out there if we would just look at it in a slightly different way. Like you say, look and see what the capabilities are beyond what it's designed to do. So yeah, my door spoon handle is never leaving. I'm afraid this is
Hey, if it works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's home.
I have just one more question for you, because I don't want to not mention the CWIT side of things, but one more before we finish up is that you were a founding member of CWIT, which is Connecting Women in Technology. So over the years, I mean, that's around, how long is that around actually? When did you found it?
Jen, I didn't find that I wasn't the founding
you were just in it a really long time.
Yes, I was in it for a really long time. Yeah. It's been around since 2009. And it was around the time where I got involved after I became a mother. And that was what kind of helped me to create this network of specifically females who understood or was even opened to have conversations around female talent and seeing that as a cohort of a demographic in its own, right? And it was something that came together from between Dell, Accenture, Microsoft. They were the three, and in EY as well, Ernst & Young. They were the four founding companies, and came together, and it just grew organically since. It's all volunteer based, and we work to attract, retain, and promote women in tech, and it's really a lovely network of people just coming together and sharing, what we can do to be our best selves and how can we bring that back to our organizations. Yes. And that's one of the key tenets is sharing best practices and looking at inwardly and outwardly across Ireland within the industry. What are things that we can do to, with the communities, and how do we generate better female pipeline? How do we retain the existing pipeline that we have? And how can we work to advance the women and the talent that we do have into more decision-making spaces? So that's kind of the story of CWIT. And we have different initiatives from, STEM teacher internship and our Gains program that targets the guidance counselors. And giving them visibility to careers in tech. And, same for digital futures, looking at demystifying what it means to work in technology. And, those are STEM teacher internship will help to give teachers a inside view with our participating members of what it's like to work in tech. So it's not, giving them that opportunity to be in the field and knowing what we mean when we talk about collaboration and what those challenges are, is putting, we can read all about swimming as all we want, but until you're in the water, you don't really know how to navigate it. And, we're giving that opportunity to to the teachers, and then we hopefully they're on the students to give them a bit more context to what's needed. Where do you go? How do you start, developing for a career that doesn't exist today?
Yeah.
How do you future plan for that? So those are some of the things that we work to do in the capacity within the company membership.
It's a fantastic organization, and I've met so many of the women in it before I even knew they were members, and then later realized that those amazing women that I've met are members because I was introduced to them as members via you. So all the pieces are slapping together. But yeah, it's a fantastic organization, and well done with all of the years put into it. So I think, we've covered a lot today, but I guess in finishing up, is there anything that you want to say, any final words or anything for somebody out there who might be listening, who is maybe considering a move into tech or returning into tech or anything like that, that you might say to those?
I would say find a friend and go from there. If you're interested, definitely don't be shy to ask for more information. And I don't know what it's like to do a lot of things. And so I go out. It's braving to start a conversation and be prepared for a lot of first dates. And, they don't all work out. And some are great, but you'll never lose from trying. And so that's my advice for anyone who's looking to change their career, re-enter the workforce, or, looking to do something different as they're taking a pause in their career as well, is just ask a friend and then see where it goes. Ireland, I know we're speaking to somewhat of an Irish audience, but at the same time, lighting it up is in 13 countries now. So I don't want to dismiss that, but really look at the connectivity that you're creating, and look at your network, and just, be the worst thing that can happen is somebody says, no, but maybe talk to this other person instead.
Yeah.
So you'll always get somebody. And for me, it's just getting out there, asking a lot of questions, and, maybe don't be too shy about speaking really loudly. It's okay.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely.
Not at all. And I actually do wanted to say, because of your audience, I would like to, greet them as well. And just to say, in addition to saying, thank you for having me, I wanted to say, gracias por invitarme. You're amable. Well done. Merci de me recevoir. And obrigado por me recibir. I got this one that was a tongue twister. It was like shukran lidewati. That was a tough one.
Gosh. You're really playing it.
Like,
I forgot you told me you were learning all these different languages. Like, well done.
Yeah. Duolingo. This is not a plug, but I'm doing it anyways. But my natively, for Cantonese from Hong Kong, 多謝你請我嚟呢邊. And 謝謝你邀請我. So my, thank you for having me ultimately. And to anyone who took the time to listen as well, appreciate your time and listening to us too.
Thanks, Annie.